Hey guys, how are you all doing today? Long time no see. It's been a while since I uploaded my last YouTube video, and that's what I thought. Let's do a new one. And today I want to edit one of my photos, one of my sport photos I did take for TSV 1860 Munich. As some of you may know, I am currently shooting the home games for TSV 1860 Munich, and today's photo I want to edit. It's one of the photos, one of my favorite photos I took from one of the last games. It was a floodlight game, and as you can see in the raw image, uh, one of my favorite photos because of all the flashlights, all the mobile flashlights in the background, and the player in the foreground, and you get a little bit of texture and a little bit of behind the scenes feeling with the banner on the side. And you've been asking what I do, how I do my sport photography, how I edit my photos, and that's what I want to show you today. So, first up, some basic information. The image itself was taken with my Sony Alpha 7R3, which is currently recording the video, and my 85mm 1.4 Sigma lens. I especially love this lens because my goal in sport photography is not to solely focus on what's happening on the pitch itself, but also the surroundings, what's going on in a stadium. How can I capture the atmosphere within the stadium in one single frame? And that's why I love using the 85mm lens, because you can get up close to a player if you like to, but you get also the surroundings, everything that's going on inside the stadium in the photo as well. And 85mm lens with a 1.4, so you get the beautiful blur of the background, and you get the viewer's attention to the main aspect of the photo, the player, but you get also the beautiful blur of everything that surrounds the player. The photo was taken at a speed of 1 to 2 thousandths of a second and with an ISO of 1250. So in that photo, or in most of my images, when I start editing, the first thing I'm going to do is adjust the tone curve. For a lot of my images, for a lot of my photos, I use the same tone curve, and then adjust it a little bit depending on the image itself, depending on the situation, the lights, if it's cloudy, whatever the conditions are. And that's my main tone curve. So the raw image itself, it looks, right now it doesn't look good, but we eventually get there. And the tone curve is pretty straightforward. I like to up the blacks a little bit, lower the whites, and just straighten it out. And for the red, green, and blues, I have a tone curve which is basically an S curve for all of my three colors, and you can copy that. You can try it yourself. That's my basically my main tone curves, which I'm using in a lot of my photos. Then let's get to basics. So in that case, as you can see, you need to up the exposure. I'm going to up it quite a lot because I would like to get more details, more information of the background and the foreground. And the contrast itself was kind of adjusted in the tone curve, but in that case, as you can see, it's pretty bright right now. I'm going to lower it a lot, and then I'm going to reduce the highlights a lot, because I'm a big fan of reducing the whites, reducing the highlights, and upping the shadows and blacks a little bit. So let's reduce the highlights, and you can clearly see that the image immediately gets a lot better. Let's go to -61. I'm going to up the shadows a little bit, not much, just a tiny bit. And then reducing the whites. So as you can see, just with those little adjustments, you don't get flashbanged by the photo, and it's overall a more cohesive and clean look. And then I'm going to up the blacks a little bit, just a tiny bit, not much. And then, because of using my Black Promise filter, I love reducing the clarity. I'm a big fan of pushing the clarity to -15, -20. Be a little bit radical if you like. And then I up the texture a bit just to get a cleaner, a more crispier, sharp look. And then I'm going to dehaze it a bit, just a tiny bit to improve, to get a little bit more glow, a little bit more bloom. And then I'm leave vibrance and saturation as it is right now, and I'm jumping straight into Color Mixer. So right now you can see the green is pretty, I don't want to say unnatural, but it's really saturated, neon looking. Yeah, it's kind of unnatural. It's not that greeny grass you see when you step outside. That's due to because it's dark, and then with the floodlights on, it becomes that unnatural greeny look. So I want to move the greens a little bit to yellow. And the blues, I'm gonna reduce the blues a little bit. And then I wanna turn the luminance of the blues down to make the kits, the jerseys from the player more pop. As you can see, the player the jersey is has more contrast right now, so it's popping a little bit more. I'm going to reduce the luminance of the greens to make the pitch not scream into your face and stand out right away. I'm upping the saturation of the reds a little bit, just to highlight the away kit from the other team's player. Then I'm going to just a tiny bit reduce the yellow, because the field is a mixture of green and yellow. I'm going to reduce the yellows of the pitch as well, the luminance. And after I adjusted the color mix a little bit, what some of the people I know don't love doing is go into color calibration, but it's one of my favorite tools to use. So in color calibration, I like to adjust the greens a little bit, just a tiny bit. Then the reds, as you can see how when I adjust the sliders a lot more, you can see the difference, what's happening to the photo. In that case, I want to turn the reds more into a little bit of orange. And I like to have the blues reduced a little bit as well. And then overall increase the saturation of the reds and increase the saturation of the blues to make the kit more pop, and then reduce the green primary because I want to reduce the color of the pitch, basically the saturation of the pitch. So let's go into color grading now. Color grading, I always do some slight adjustments, just a little bit of colors here and there, just to add a little bit, just a tiny bit, not much, because I don't want to make the image look out of control, if you want to say. So you can see what happens to the image if I add some colors to the shadows. So in that case, I want to have a tiny bit of blue in the shadows. Let's do 225. And then when you adjust the luminance, I am going to reduce it a little bit. Just a tiny bit. Let's do -17. And in the middle tones, I like to add some purple to make the, as you can see, the line is kind of greenish as well, the white line. So I'd like to add some purple to the middle tones to kind of counterplay the overall greenish look of the image, to get it more balanced out, to have the whites looking more like whites and not have the greenish tone in it. So +6 saturation, so not much, just a tiny bit to balance it out. And then the highlights, I like to add a little bit of orange, just a tiny bit, and up the highlights to make the jersey more pop, to make the whites and the background lights of the flashlights more pop. And then I like to blend it a little bit and adjust the balance to -20. Let's go to effects. So I love using a vignette. Not a strong vignette, but just a tiny vignette to have the focus of the viewer into the main subject of the image, which is the player. So let's go with a vignette of, let's say, -8, a little bit more. -15 looks good. I up the highlights to 100, and what I most of the time do, midpoint. As you can see, midpoint, how the vignette gets more dark on the outside, midpoint to 0, and then roundness and feather up to 100 to make it look as natural as possible, but have the balance between looking as natural as possible, but also having the focus, the eyes of the viewer guiding towards the main subject of the image, which is the player. And then in my images, I love using grain. So before adjusting the grain, I go to details. As when you shoot at ISO 1250, you get a little bit of noise. So I denoise the image a bit, not much. Denoise luminescence to 15. As you can see, it's just a slight adjustment, and then denoise the color a little bit to, let's say, plus 35. Not much, just some tiny adjustments. Then go back into grain, and most of the time I use a grain of around 20 to 25, depending on the image. Let's say 22, but I up the roughness to plus 80. So as you can see, it's clear, you have clearly a grain in it, but it's a beautiful tiny grain which adds just some finishing touches on the photo itself. So when I remove the grain and the vignette, you can clearly see it. So that's without the vignette and the grain. and that's with the vignette and grain. So it just those tiny adjustments improve the whole image a lot because of the viewer guidance, because of the guidance for the viewer towards the main subject. And when I go closer on the player and I do it again, you can see the grain. It's not much, but it's just, in my opinion, some finishing touches on the image. And when I'm done with the photo, I'm not 100% completely satisfied right now. And that's why a lot of things I do as well is adding a linear gradient at the bottom. In that case, I do it a little bit not straight, but a little bit adjusted for the banner on the side, because I want to darken that area and guide the viewer's eyes again towards the main subject. So I reduce the exposure, up the contrast a little bit, and reduce the blacks, reduce the whites, just some tiny adjustments. You don't want to overload everything and don't want to make your image look unnatural. You still want to have that natural look to it, but improved. So you can see clearly now when I'm removing the gradient, and then when I have the gradient in play. So you can see clearly the difference now, and you can see that the bright cables or bright electronics behind the banner are now darkened, and so it doesn't distract the viewer from the main subject, the player, and it also has the guidance of the eye towards the player. And let's do a second linear gradient. In a lot of my photos, especially day photos, but also night photos here, I love to dehaze. Right now you don't see a lot of change, but I love to dehaze and reduce clarity of the sky. Why? Again, just to add some final touches, just to soften up the image and to guide the viewer towards the main subject. If you like to hear, you can select subject. Let's go over it real quick. You need to filter out the part between his hands, but you can select subject, add some more exposure, add some more contrast, some more clarity to make the player even more stand out. But again, in that case, if you use something like that, be careful to only do some slight adjustment, to slightly adjust the layer, the mask, because you don't want to make it look like you photoshopped something into the image which doesn't belong here. So just some slight improvements here and there. And that's basically it. So, well, editing Michael here, and I totally forgot to record an outro. So if you liked today's video, drop a like, leave a comment, and maybe hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.